set the date way before anybody knew the eclipse was going to drive everybody crazy around here, right? So it seemed like a fine date at that point. So our main impact obviously is going to be the recording, which we are going to distribute very widely after this event. So just so everybody knows, thank you very much for attending. Okay. So I think we're all set. Everybody ready?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, control room. Let's go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening. Today is Monday, April 8, 2024. And I welcome the folks who are here in person. And I hope everybody had a fantastic time with Eclipse Mania today. So I think we did it too. So my name is John Harris. I'm co-chair of Climate Action Brookline. I'll be moderating this evening's Select Board Candidate Environmental Forum. Thanks to all the candidates for appearing and putting on your climate thinking caps. And thanks to all attendees. And in advance, I'm going to thank all the people who will watch this recording. As the chief executives of our volunteer town government, the members of the Select Board will be increasingly the major players in Brookline's climate response. And our goals are and must be ambitious. Massachusetts has set a goal of net zero carbon emissions by 2050, and Brookline has set an even more ambitious goal to be net zero by 2040, just 16 years from now. To give a sense of the urgency, the Northeast is seeing the same rise in temperatures as California and Colorado, but because we receive more rainfall, we have not seen devastating forest fires. But in recent weeks, you may have noticed in southern Atlantic states like Virginia and West Virginia, they've seen many large fires. As the temperatures warm, there's no guarantee that our rainfall in the Northeast will continue to be so plentiful. Do not be fooled by the mild winter. It will get increasingly hotter even here in Brookline, Massachusetts. This year, the Select Board race is highly competitive. 5 candidates for 2 seats. So we eagerly look forward to learning their familiarity with climate issues and their thoughts, how we should set our priorities and move forward. And Steve, if you could show the slide to the remote folks, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Be all set.
Should be all set. Okay. This graphic is very useful as we prioritize our responses to the climate crisis. It comes from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, just dated 2020, so it's very new information. What it shows is that in Massachusetts, the transportation sector is 37% of greenhouse gases. Steve, can you show that here big on this screen too? And we do have some giveaway copies. If someone would, in-person folks, thank you. I will appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. The transportation sector in Massachusetts is responsible for 37% of our greenhouse gases, the building sector, 35%, and electric power for 20%. The total of those three, 92% of greenhouse gases in Massachusetts. Everything else is only 8%. So we call those three the big three. We must have robust climate programs, projects, and interventions for transportation, buildings, and electric power if we want to have a meaningful climate response. And by the way, we will need ideas and energy from all 4 major sectors of Brookline's society and economy: residential, commercial, municipal. But by the way, the town is only 3% of greenhouse gases in Mass. And finally, the Brookline Public Schools. So let's see. Okay, I'll ask Steve to take down the slide for the remote viewers. It's important we understand that tonight we will be debating issues and not personalities. And the watchword is on that: it's okay to compliment others, but not to criticize anyone by name. The candidates are in, yep, there we go, no problem. Good. Excellent. Okay. The in-person candidates are seated in alphabetical order by last name. And then Sana Hafiz, Sana Hafiz is here remotely, as you can see. We will follow alphabetical order by last name in all responses to the questions. We'll just skip one each time so it'll advance. You'll see. So, okay. To make sure a wide range of issues are covered, we ask climate activists and skeptics to submit questions in advance. We will not be taking questions from the audience. The candidates have not seen any of the questions. And just because we have 5 people and a fairly hard stop at 6:30, 2 minutes for all candidate remarks, including opening statements. And I do know it's especially hard to keep to 2 minutes for an opening statement. And I did remind the candidates that at the BNA forum a week or so ago, they began with their general background. They're welcome to do that again now or jump right into their climate concerns. So 2 minutes opening statement, 2 minutes for each question, and finally, 2 minutes for closing statements. Remind the candidates you don't have to use all 2 minutes. Brevity and succinctness are highly valued here. So opening statements, 2 minutes each, beginning with Bernard Green.
Thank you. Good evening. I think you all know me. I'm Bernard Green, currently chair of the Brookline Select Board, and I'm running for re-election. I have 18 years of experience in town governance in Brookline, 9 years on the Select Board, and many, many years on many, many committees. I'm not running on promises I make during the campaign or my great ideas, although I do have some, that I hope to implement. Rather, I'm running on what I have done for this town over the many years in my experience in town government. That experience helps me make prudent decisions when the concrete but difficult issues are presented to the town, and I have to consider the actual conditions and needs of the town at that time, because that is when your promises hit the reality of the limitations of governing and the many stakeholders whose needs you need to balance. You may not have agreed with all the decisions I've made, but you know that my commitment to addressing the climate crisis is real, and our disagreements are minor matters of nuance, such as tone or my concern with the impact on vulnerable communities or others like seniors and the disabled. My disagreements are not based on the substance of the climate crisis. While it is important to be smart and have good ideas, and I am, what is more important in terms of getting things done is having experience and knowledge of how the town operates, its powers and limitations, and its relation to state and federal agencies and representatives, and knowing when and how to reach out to those state and federal representatives to achieve the goals that we have. Without that, good ideas are really not much good for anything. Thank you.
Next candidate, Sana Hafiz.
Thank you. My name is Sana Hafiz. I'm a 27-year-old first-generation Pakistani American Muslim woman. I'm a lifelong athlete and travel enthusiast. I live in Precinct 4, shout out to the village, which has really become my family. I worked as a community organizer, nonprofit national program director, as well as in the aviation and green tech industries. I believe in community-based solutions and the values of equity, accessibility, and transparency in governance. Sustainability and protecting our environment for our communities is, of course, a grounding value in my work. I work to address affordable childcare, affordable housing, workforce development and job skills programs, environmental sustainability in a transparent and accountable manner in Brookline. And I've experienced the barriers to community-based solutions when they reach the office of Select Board firsthand. Despite the barriers, historic progress has been made, but no amount of hard work can overcome repeated ineffective fiscal decisions. I would employ tried and true methods such as empowering solutions that originate from the communities, those with the lived experience in these issues, rather than virtue signaling efforts that have little to no tangible impact. Brookline is at the forefront of many new projects, but we're severely lacking in effective implementation, meaningful inclusion, and making measurable change in those most impacted and vulnerable to the negative effects of climate change.
1 minute, Sana.
Thank you. We cannot continue to allow Brookline's most marginalized to be an afterthought. We need actions that impact people today that may not be seen as glamorous or headline catching, but make real change. Looking at ARPA alone, you can see how millions were squandered. So I would definitely assess the effectiveness of our allocating and our budgeting, which I'm in the process of doing, and use that data to inform where else we can evaluate. Funds
30
wasted,
seconds, please.
Thank you. Funds wasted, labor wasted, and frustrations rising will also negatively impact our environment and our ability to have community buy-in for these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alec Leibovitz.
Thank you, John. Good evening, all. My name is Alec Lebovitz. I'm a town meeting member representing Coolidge Corner, and I'm running for select board because I love this town. It's been my adoptive home for the last 8 years, ever since I came to Greater Boston for a higher education. We have so much to celebrate about Brookline, but we face serious challenges as well. Our community is increasingly unaffordable. Our municipal finances are strained. We're grappling with a region-wide housing crisis, and we're confronting as a community the looming threat of climate change. But despite the challenges, I have a lot of hope and a lot of optimism for Brookline's future. When we have leadership that brings people together, that listens to and respects the diversity of opinions, that is data-driven and compassionate, this community can accomplish great things and can move the needle in the face of challenges like climate change. These are the principles that have guided me during my time in town meeting, and this is the kind of leadership that I will bring to the select board. Public policy has been my life's passion. In my career, I'm a policy analyst specializing in state and federal Medicaid policy, the safety net of our healthcare system. In various roles in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, I've seen firsthand the impact that public policy can make in people's lives. And as an advocate, a policy professional, and a researcher, I've spent my life exploring how effective policies are created and implemented, and most importantly, how to win support for those policies. Climate change is the existential crisis facing our planet, and it's one that my generation will be grappling with for our entire lives. I've consistently supported climate and sustainability measures in town meeting, and as a member of the select board, I will do everything in my power to ensure Brookline not only meets our aggressive sustainability goals, but acts as a leading municipality in the fight against the climate catastrophe. We only get one planet, and protecting our environment and leaving a safer world for the next generations is of paramount importance. That fight must begin at the local level, and as Brookline has already proven, what happens here can echo across the state, the country, and the globe. When we dare to dream big, to swing for the fences, and to trial innovative policies here, we can create not just a local impact, but a global impact. The time to act is now, and I will bring this urgency of the moment with me to the select board. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Park, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Park. It's great to see everyone again. I am a town meeting member in Precinct 17 in my second term, and the Town Meeting Member Association Vice President in my second term. And I have a lot of different experiences serving on boards and committees. I got my public leadership credential certificate from the Harvard Kennedy School in my excitement to lead and serve our town. And I also sat on the Brookline Fiscal Advisory Committee. So what defines good leadership? Empathy, authenticity, courage, integrity, flexibility, open to change, commitment, vision, evidence of collaboration, communicating others, and leading. And these are all different qualities that my friends and colleagues have told me I exhibit. I led a ballot referendum last May that passed in all 17 precincts because I built consensus and was courageous enough to ask the questions. And I believe a diversity of experiences and perspectives will make the select board stronger and better, especially when you work well with others, you listen to others, you show up, and you want to find solutions. So I want to just say a few years ago, when there was a resolution to make Brookline carbon-free, I'm proud of my Girl Scout troop 82545. We showed up at town meeting and they worked really hard, and 6 girls talked about why it's important to pass this resolution. And I was happy to know that, we all know that it passed. So I'm excited about that. There's a lot of work we need to do. There's a lot that needs to get done, and it takes educating our public. Because I was a former teacher, I have the educational skills, collaboration to get this job done. Thank you.
Thank you. And just remind all the candidates that you do have 2 minutes for closing remarks, anything you haven't gotten to up till then. And thank you. Next, David Perlman, please.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for putting this together, John, and for others who were involved. So I'm David Perlman, and Brookline courses through my veins. I've been living in this town since I was 4 years old in 1986. I'm a graduate of the Brookline Public Schools, pre-K through grade 12. I stayed local for my collegiate and law school years. In my professional life, I'm a child welfare attorney involved in neglect cases and also assisting my clients with housing instability, health-related issues, guardianship, and adoption. I have been very committed to this town because of the outstanding experiences I've had growing up here. So starting in 2013, I began serving in town meeting, and I'm still in town meeting today, so over 10 years. In 2018, I ran for school committee successfully. I was reelected to school committee in 2021, and for the last 2 years, I've been serving as the chair of the school committee. In that capacity, climate change has always been a very important issue. As chair of the policy subcommittee, I helped put together a sustainability task force that is currently in operation, focusing in 6 areas of transportation, education curriculum, food, waste, buildings management, and green space management. I've also served on the Select Board Climate Action Committee during my time on school committee, and I've also served on the Net Zero Schools subcommittee. So I have experience of having already worked on a lot of these important issues that we'll be talking about today. And if you help elect me to select board, I'll continue to work in those areas. I'm the father of a 9-month-old son, so climate change is very important to me. I want to make sure that the world he grows up in is going to be one where we don't have, flooding and too much heat, and that we are using renewable energy sources. And my time is up. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll begin the questions now. Many questions have been submitted, as I say, by both climate activists and climate skeptics, I guess I would say. We've prioritized them according to the big 3 greenhouse gas sources in Massachusetts. We'll get to as many as we have time for. Again, starting with transportation, which is responsible for 37% of greenhouse gases in Massachusetts. By the way, the first respondent will be Sana this time. First of all, transportation, 2 areas. One is electric vehicles for trips that require a car. And what would you do to increase the number of EV charging stations in public parking lots? And how would you reduce those costs of when people are doing that? Because when added to general parking fees, credit card fees, et cetera, that can double the cost of driving each mile in a compared to driving each mile in a fossil fuel powered car, especially regarding overnight charging. And finally, how would you balance the number of EV charging only parking spaces with general car parking spaces in town lots? So again, first respondent, Sana Hafiz, please.
Thank you so much. So your question has multiple parts, but I think the fact that this question is worded the way it is a direct testament to how we're lacking perspective in Brookline. Of course, there's so much to be gained from electrifying Brookline in terms of transportation being electrified, private use, as well as town department vehicles. And of course, to effectively use these changes, we have to make these EV charging stations available regularly. We have to make sure that they're along accessible path lines, that they're accessible for folks to come and drop off their cars and then be able to get home as well and use them that way. They're not, having to have someone pick them up or Uber home or any other number of measures. However, I think what really does need to also be brought into the picture is that everyday transportation is not being looked at in this way. Brookline has such a mass amount of resources and qualified professionals, industry experts, so on and so forth. And we see a lot of these efforts, such as electrifying Brookline, all the things we just discussed. But what we're not seeing is the town take advantage of a lot of other changes that are coming as well. I mean, if you look at the aviation industry itself, which I work in, UAM Concept 2.0 is rapidly coming into fruition. And, a lot of what they tackle is alternative methods of transportation that can increase access, decrease the amount of emissions, as well as, implement more sustainable technologies. If you look at, some of these new things under urban air mobility, they can—
One minute, Sana.
Sure. They can definitely be implemented in Brookline. So while increasing EV stations is definitely a priority and making sure that that implementation is thoughtful and effective, I think that a more important conversation is how can we make transportation more accessible, not just for those that can afford an electric vehicle, but for everyday residents as well? And can we make sure that they have access to these things as regularly as folks that have larger incomes? Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, Alec Leibovitz, please.
Thank you, John. And I appreciate the question. It's a very important component of us thinking about how we can plan for our transportation future. I live right across the street from the Babcock Street parking lot, which is municipally owned and was one of the first lots in town to adopt EV charging only spots. And that has been a massive success from my perspective. It is providing a valuable community resource to our neighborhoods in North Brookline, where folks are trying to make that transition to EVs. And it has not required us to use much of the space available in that lot. We currently have, I believe it's 3 spots. It's between 2 and 4, but I believe it's 3. So I think 98% of the spots in that lot have been unaltered. Of course, we are going to want to be on the cutting edge of leading the transition from fossil fuel burning cars towards electric vehicles, which means while we do need to balance the availability of general parking, as we go forward, we can start to convert more of those spots to charging stations and to EV-only spots. But I think making savvy use of our municipally owned lots is a big part of this equation, and incentivizing the use of commercial lots or the development of some spots in those lots might also be an important part of that equation. We did just go through a municipal process to determine the appropriate fee level to be assessed for use of charging stations on municipal properties. I believe that in the long term, we may want to consider lowering that assessed fee on charging as we continue to provide incentives to residents in town to make that transition. And that may need to come with the cross-subsidization of other regular parking meters that are not EV restricted. But finally, I do want to say this, I think, goes much broader than just thinking about how we can make the transition among automobiles. We do need to I think, take a holistic view of our transportation needs and incentivize the use of pedestrian access, biking where possible, and really build out that alternative infrastructure as well. Every car we get off the road goes a long way towards reducing that 37% of emissions. Thank you.
Susan Park, please.
Thank you for this question, Sean. So it's very important that if we're going to meet our climate goals by 2050, we need to help the people of Brookline motivate, encourage. And so we need to be working alongside our community. And if these are our goals and these are the state's goals, then we need to work really hard at finding where we're going to put these EV chargers. Now, I just went to the Brookline walk that Pat Maher and the Friends of the Public Health organized. And they did a wonderful job last week. So shout out to them. And we walked over to the EV station in the Pierce parking lot. And so we're starting to see that the EV chargers are expanding all over Brookline. And basically, I agree with my colleague who said that the municipal lots are great places to put EV chargers. We need to really strategize. I read in a document that the town is looking for to put 50 more. And we're going to find those places by looking at lots. School parking lots should have them. Even condos and private properties, they have places to put them. Even behind my condo, someone had installed them themselves. Where are we going to get the funds? There are grants from the state. There are a lot of incentives that Mass Save and the state is willing to give to help in this endeavor. And there's also zip lots, places where people go and rent cars. There are EV chargers there. But the key is meeting our goals. And, so we need to just continue to work hard on this. Thank you.
Thank you. David Perlman, please.
I think that the question of electric vehicle charging also fits quite nicely with the comprehensive planning and complete streets efforts that are already underway. Because as we are looking to improve walkability and accessibility in our neighborhoods, this also provides us with an opportunity to see what the ideal locations would be to install additional EV chargers. I would agree that municipal lots are a good starting point, and also that we should look at private parcels, not just through incentives for new developments, but also for existing properties. Let's try to incentivize the addition of EV chargers for buildings that are already standing. I think that would be a quicker way to be able to expand the availability of EV charging. We also, though, want to encourage all kinds of modes of transportation that are not CO2 producing. So, of course, in addition to looking at where to put EV chargers, we also want to work on our broader transportation infrastructure to make sure that we are a community where people can go bicycling fairly easily and safely, where we are within walking distance of other modes of transportation that do not utilize CO2, or meaning larger vehicles. So we can also have town vehicles get around. We do that on the school level, and we also do that to a limited degree for our seniors. So looking to expand those programs.
Thank you. Bernard Green, please.
Okay, thank you for the question. It's an interesting question that has a lot of aspects to it that I think that we don't always think about. But let's start off with the cost of charging stations at public lots. When we talk about electrifying our fleet, the cost of the cars is just part of the cost of doing that. And the cost of the charging stations and technologies has to be included in that cost also. You asked about balancing the availability of EV sites with other parking sites. I would add not only EV and gas-powered cars, but also EV and handicap cars. That's something that I don't think that people think about as much as they should. But handicap EV stations are a lot different than regular charging stations. We also need to think about the expansion of charging stations on private lots, private properties. And that raises a number of issues that should be thought through in the context of our comprehensive planning process, such as what type of zoning changes are needed to allow that type of charging technology on private properties. Does our electrical infrastructure accommodate anything other than the most basic charging technologies? And when we're looking at emission-free technologies, are we looking beyond 2040? And what is the technology going to be at that point? Will it be electrical cars, or will it be something else, such as hydrogen fuel cells? Those are things that we should think about early on, and I think our comprehensive planning process is one way that that's going to be done. Just in time.
Okay, thank you. Staying with transportation, the other major part of transportation, again, 37% of greenhouse gases in mass that we have gotten questions on is micromobility. And the question is, for trips that do not require a car, how important is providing safe streets for bicyclists and other micromobility users in our net zero strategy, and what should be done about it? And the first respondent, Alec Leibovitz, please.
Thank you, John. Yeah, I think this question is absolutely essential to the mission that we all should share to get that transportation emissions portion down. And the reality is, one of the major barriers today in Brookline to easy pedestrian access to much of the town, and certainly biking access, are concerns about safety. It's something I've heard quite a lot about over the last few months on the campaign trail, particularly when speaking with folks who live south of Route 9. There is a sense, I think, among those neighborhoods that there is no safe way to get across Route 9 to access North Brookline, to access the Brookline High School or Town Hall or any of the common amenities that really should be accessible to everyone in the community because there is no safe bike passage across that major artery. So as a member of the select board, I think that's a crucial starting point and something actionable that we can really work on and sink our teeth into in the first few years. But even beyond that, I think we have made some strides in recent years in building out biking infrastructure in North Brookline, but we have really been woefully inadequate in what we've been able to do in South Brookline. So I'd really like to see greater investment there in building out our bike infrastructure. And as I mentioned, creating connectivity, not just between North and South, but even within neighborhoods on both sides of Route 9. In terms of pedestrian access, probably aside from housing, the number one issue I hear about from folks talking on the doors and on the campaign trail is the state of our roads and sidewalks. And that is an absolutely critical part of pedestrian access. There are swaths of Brookline today that are completely inaccessible to folks in wheelchairs, to people who may have limited mobility for other reasons. And the reality is that is due to a lack of sustained investment on our part over time. I have last year joined with transportation advocates in town meeting to advocate with the town administration to begin shifting resources into making investments in our road and sidewalks. I'm pleased to report that that amount was increased from about $2 million a year to about $5 million a year. But these are long-term investments, so we need to continue to make those, and hopefully those will pay dividends down the road.
Thank you. Susan Park, please.
Thank you, Sean. Here, Alec. I agree with my colleague. It's really important, once again, that we reach our climate goals for 2050. And if we're going to do that, we really need to see, how we can reduce the carbon. And transportation, that's 37% of our carbon emission. And so I'm thrilled to see the complete streets. The process has begun, and it's really important that we continue with that. We want to make sure that people from South Brookline can get to North Brookline, especially the students. The students who live in North Brookline, they can walk or they can bike to BHS, but in South Brookline, it is very dangerous. And I don't want to remind everyone, but we have had fatalities that had to do with bikers in the last couple of years. So we don't want to keep seeing that. We want safety. We want our students to feel safe, but also the whole idea of the health factor. We want our community, we want Brookline to be healthy, to bike, to walk. And unless we build out the complete streets and really share the road with others, and even folks in wheelchairs, seniors who use walkers, and the sidewalks are sometimes not leveled. Oftentimes, that is a real thing to be concerned about. My in-laws, I worry all the time that with a sidewalk that's not completely flat and not, with all these potholes and things, it just takes one trip, one fall, and you could be out, you could have hip surgery, et cetera. So it's really important that we keep working on this. And so once again, I will say that we want to do this so that we can meet our goals by 2050. Thanks.
Thank you. David Perlman, please.
So a very interesting statistic I came across is that for every mile that we walk or bike, we actually reduce a pound of carbon. And that really underscores the importance of creating accessibility and safety for both pedestrians and for our bicyclists. I myself am a rollerblader, so I sometimes use the bike lane responsibly, of course. And that is something that we really ought to prioritize, and I'm glad that we already are to some extent. In my role as a school committee member and as chair, I have helped provide a platform for Richard Murphy and the very important work he's been doing to create that north-south connectivity that we're hearing some of the other candidates talk about. I'm not a big fan of share lanes because I don't think that's particularly safe to expect bicyclists to be able to share the same lane as motorists. There have been multiple fatalities in South Brookline where we don't have the greatest bike infrastructure in place. So that would certainly be a priority and a part of the complete streets process that we need to look at. In terms of sidewalk repairs, there are parts of town, as we heard others mention, that don't even have sidewalks at all. So in addition to repairing existing sidewalks, we also need to look strategically about the parts of town where we should be adding sidewalks so that those neighborhoods can be more pedestrian friendly. It's also important to consider lighting in this context because sometimes it's not the sidewalk, but whether people can even see. And that's been a problem even in some of our more urban parts of town. And so that's another element of road and sidewalk safety.
Thank you. Let's see, Bernard Green, please.
Tuesday, at our select board meeting, we're going to be discussing the complete streets policy of the town. And one of the issues that we're concerned about is that our road maintenance many times is impeded by having to comply fully with complete streets. There's a way of balancing that that we have to find because, as everyone knows, the condition of our streets is really very, very bad, despite the fact that we're spending much more money on maintenance. It's a function of our climate as well as other things. I agree with David's comments regarding South Brookline and creating some type of north-south connectivity for bikers. It's critically important, especially for high school students who can use a reasonable bike path to get to the high school from South Brookline, and we need to make that a priority. When we're talking about other modes of transportation, I think we need to look at all of them. Bikes, David's rollerblading, which I don't understand, scooters, but also electric wheelchairs. A lot of people, I know people who live around me who drive around or ride around in electric wheelchairs. They're not going to be in the bike lanes. They're going to be on the sidewalk. So we need to really make sure that we prioritize dealing with the pretty bad condition of many of our sidewalks so that not just bikers and rollerbladers and others have access to good transportation opportunities, but also people with disabilities who have somewhat different needs. And I guess that's it. Thank you.
Perfect
Just in
timing.
time.
Okay, we're going to move on to buildings now, which are 5% of greenhouse gas. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I forgot the remote. Sana Hafiz, please.
No problem. Thank you so much. In regard to the questions asked, I of course support biking and other sustainable modes of transportation. I think microtransportation in itself is a really good example of how good ideas and well-meaning ideas can cause harm when not thoughtfully implemented. We've seen a lot of controversy in terms of folks on the sidewalks and how it's caused a lot of distress to a lot of our marginalized community members, such as, the elderly folks in town that, it can be a bit alarming to them when someone comes up upon you really quickly and it can be unsafe. On that same note, I think that I'd love to see a biking bus, like, in the communities I grew up in. But again, it's not safe for a lot of folks. And the folks that it's not safe for are those that have been, repeatedly not included in these projects. South Brookline, we keep hearing that again and again and again. These are the communities that are not included in the conversations of, how to make things more accessible, how to make things greener, how do we implement a change that is actually usable for folks, that need it the most. Our low-income communities are the ones that will benefit the most from a free mode of transportation. Our low-income communities are the ones that are most impacted by environmental racism, yet the communities that—
1 minute, please.
Sure, need this the most are the ones that are excluded. We can't just make solutions, that are greener, and forget who we're making this planet greener for. We have to include the communities themselves that we're doing this for. I agree about the status of accessibility and our roads and sidewalks. I've seen how folks get locked into their homes during the winter because of the lack of snow shoveling and, the uneven surfaces. I've seen folks in wheelchairs having to cross in the road.
30 seconds.
Thank you. And getting honked at, it's not acceptable, but with thoughtful inclusion, we can change that. Additionally, I just want to highlight this one fact that, while we're talking about, trips that don't need a vehicle, we can also reduce the amount of trips point blank period needed in town by increasing affordable housing in town so they don't have to commute outside of it, increasing affordable childcare in town so folks aren't making those multiple trips a day, and as well as reducing trips needed for package delivery and other things like that, which, hopefully I'll be able to get into in another section. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to buildings, which are responsible for 35% of greenhouse gases in Massachusetts. The first respondent will be Susan Park, and the question is, how do you think Brookline should tackle the challenge of transitioning existing residential and commercial buildings from gas and oil to all electric? And in particular, I'm combining a couple of different questions here. Electrification is very expensive in older homes and apartment buildings where entire wiring systems have to be upgraded. What can the town do to help people who might have to pay $50,000 to $100,000 per house or apartment unit simply to get their electric systems upgraded to support electrification?
Thank you for the question, Sean. That's a very important question. Excuse me. So what the town could do, Wellesley, if you look at their website, they have a climate dashboard. And the dashboard basically shows what projects are being done, the process that they're doing, and then if it's finalized. And on their website, they also have a climate concierge, a climate consultant. And so this is really important. I know that after talking to a few of the ZAB board members, they were saying that the climate director in Brookline that position has not been filled yet. And they're waiting for that. And I think that person is coming, is what I've heard. And so I think it's pivotal to have that person, because what I'm understanding is that the people of Brookline, there could be a percentage of people who are ready to make that change now, and maybe they don't need assistance. But then there's other people who are thinking about it, and they do need some guidance. And then, I know that there is a document circulating with people who have actually done some assessment, and they've recorded like who they've used. So that document's really important. But I know Mass Save has, if you call Mass Save, they've got an assessment consultant who will come and help you. They'll walk through, they'll look at your place, they'll tell you what you need to do. And I think that this kind of guidance is really important. Because of my career, I was the head of the English department at a school and taught middle school, high school, college, adults. I think if I'm on the select board, I would really be a great person to help get this information out and help our community. Thank you.
Thank you. David Perlman, please.
So for those who can afford it, I would certainly encourage all green, and there are different levels. There's the 65% coverage, there's 100% coverage. It is true that swapping out utilities can sometimes be expensive with green technologies, and not everyone can necessarily afford it. But there actually are some affordable options that can help at least reduce energy demand and energy waste. So some examples of that: installing LED light bulbs, low flow shower heads, smart power strips. There are also plastic window kits to try to help insulate and to limit drafts. This is something that my wife likes to do in a very rudimentary way, but it appears to work, and even with saran wrap. So that's not super expensive. So all of us, no matter our income level, there is something that we can do to try to reduce our energy consumption and to reduce waste. Also, there are even air source heat pumps that you can install in your window. And one of the advantages of those is that despite the name, those work both to cool and to heat an area. And so those also tend to be more on the affordable side. We are very fortunate in Brookline to have some excellent resources that can help people perform sort of an energy audit on their home and be made aware of the different options that exist for them to both save money and also to reduce consumption and conserve energy.
Thank you. Bernard Green, please.
Electrification is going to be very difficult as well as very expensive, but there are means to control those costs. And on our website of the town, there are links to government subsidies and other materials that can be helpful. I want to point out the role that our Zero Admissions Advisory Board plays in this whole process. They are basically quarterbacking the town's efforts to reduce carbon emissions. And among their initiatives is a very useful one called Electrify Brookline that they're working on with Mothers Out Front, which includes a number of how-to guides that are great resources to help people understand the process of electrification, because it's not just cost, it's really understanding that process in the specific situation of their particular houses. ZAB is also has a warrant article 14 on the warrant of the Springtown meeting, which just makes some not minor, but some zoning changes that make it easier for and less costly for homeowners to electrify their housing. The sustainability director, that is something that has taken much longer than I would like it to have taken, but we are on the path of sort of reorganizing that division and hiring a sustainability director soon. And once that person is on board, they can work with ZAB to increase the work that we're doing to reduce our carbon footprint here in Brookline. So those are,
Perfect time.
again, perfect time.
Sana Hafiz, please.
Thank you. So retrofitting our buildings and making them greener is definitely a gradual but necessary step in making Brookline more sustainable. But I think we forget that the first step is often assessing, what do we have to work with? Sometimes the greener option is not to demolish and, create more waste and have to use more resources to create new, amenities, different things like that. That's the first step that you'll see on a lot of these websites themselves. So I think we have to really, really emphasize the fact that sometimes the greener option is not the more glamorous one, not the one that gets us all new appliances and all new things to say, look at how low our emissions are. But sometimes the greener option is to use what we have until it's not usable and then slowly implement those things. That's, reusing our materials. That's also a more accessible option for a lot of folks that don't have the ability to economically do this. There's a lot of programs that haven't had a lot of information in our communities, especially South Brookline, Precinct 4, so on and so forth, the low-income community, marginalized communities, like the PACE one, which helps commercial, residential, and nonprofit buildings, get a loan to make them retrofitted, to make them more sustainable. There's
1 minute, please.
Thank you. There's a lot of information that's not out there. If we're able to make sure folks are aware of the different options, they'll utilize them more often. If folks are asked for input, in these programs, there'll be more community buy-in. They'll feel like it's something coming from our community and they want to use what came from our community. I mean, CPA also has a lot of different applications for funds to make historic buildings and a lot of those different things greener. So we need to make sure that we're using a lot of these different methods that already exist.
30 seconds.
Accessible to the community. Before we start trying to create more and more new solutions, we need to assess the effectiveness of the ones we have and make sure that effectiveness is going down to all of our community members. Thank you.
Thank you. Alec Leibovitz, please.
Thank you, John. We've had a lot of success in Brookline on focusing on how to reduce emissions in new construction. We've passed fossil fuel-free zoning. We've made some other significant strides there. But I agree with Bernard. I think electrifying our existing housing and stock and built environment does present unique and I think new challenges that we need to tackle. As others have mentioned, I think there are some low-hanging fruit items that we can do quickly and do at relatively low cost to the town and to the taxpayer. Those can include zoning changes. There was mention made of warrant article 14, which we'll be voting on at the upcoming town meeting. This will provide generalized zoning relief to make it easier for the installation of heat pumps and other such accessories in Brookline. I look forward to enthusiastically supporting that article at town meeting, and I am optimistic that it will pass. There's another zoning issue involved here, which is there have been instances where historic preservation has come into conflict with our desire to electrify the buildings we have. I do think we've seen compromise solutions to many of those instances, but they do require action on our part to actually change the zoning in our historic districts. I would work very closely with ZIAB on moving those changes forward in the short term. I'll make another plug for Electrify Brookline. It truly is incredible resource, and it represents a lot of painstaking work on behalf of the climate experts we are so fortunate to have here. And residents should be encouraged and feel empowered to make the changes they can based on those resources that we've accumulated for them on the town website. But I think the central crux of this question is, how do we pay for assisting the electrification of these buildings? We've had a couple models put forward to us in town meeting. One is the extending of betterment loans, where the town could actually serve as a fiscal agent to make loans to individuals and building owners to make these retrofits. I like this model because it allows the town to recoup our expenditures while still saving residents money. And there are other options on the table as well we'll discuss momentarily. Thank you.
Thank you, Alec. Now, let's see. We're going to stay with buildings, which again, 35% of greenhouse gas emissions in Massachusetts. And this question has a lot of words, but it comes down to two simple ideas, two simple options. Brookline as a streetcar suburb, or Brookline as a Manhattan high rise. A lot of words because it's a bunch of questions combined. Two tracks that Brookline could follow for mass transit adjacent development. Many residents enjoy living in a streetcar suburb, single or two-family homes, or low-rise apartments or condos surrounded by legacy trees in green space, small yards, etc. But data shows that the most climate-efficient living pattern per capita is dense high-rise buildings where the heat of one unit rises to the one above it, like in downtown Manhattan. As Brookline continues to add housing and increase density, particularly in North Brookline, which is already a heat island, what steps should the town take to ensure that our tree canopy and green spaces are preserved to mitigate the impact of climate change and advance environmental equity? What future will you work to realize? Brookline as a streetcar suburb, or Brookline as a Manhattan-style high-rise? And the first respondent, David Perlman, please.
So I don't think this needs to be an either or. It should be neighborhood dependent, and that's part of the comprehensive planning process. So clearly in smart growth development, you want to first prioritize the areas that are closest to public transportation stations. And not all parts of Brookline are within a walkable distance of mass public transit. And so I think those areas are likelier to remain more of a streetcar suburb, although hopefully less car use. But realistically, we're going to be focusing more on the areas of town that are closest to mass transit. In terms of massing, we also want to be very careful to not add so much so quickly that it overwhelms our infrastructure. Because when we're talking about climate resiliency, we also need to make sure that there's sufficient energy to go around for everything that we're constructing, that we can afford it not just financially, but also environmentally. So that's a bit of a complex balance. In terms of what we do with new constructions, I certainly favor passive resilience and increasing vegetation. We can have vegetation walls in Medellin, Colombia. They do a lot of that. It's not only aesthetically beautiful, but it's also environmentally very advantageous. I'm in full support of the Urban Forest Climate Resiliency Master Plan and the Front Yard Tree Planting Program. These projects prioritize climate resiliency, improve stormwater management, the maintenance of existing trees, and that's critical, particularly in urban heat islands that you just referenced. Also in our newer constructions, making sure that we are very conscious of solar reflective index and building envelopes and overhangs to create more shade, dry flood proofing, water resistant materials.
Thank you. Bernard Green, please.
Okay, so what you've posed is a conflict between a streetcar suburb and Manhattan high-rise community. Now, not everyone wants to live in Manhattan. I love Manhattan myself, but to pose those as in conflict, I think really undermines our ability to figure out what is the best way to address our needs as the type of suburban community with an urban veneer that we are. Massing of housing where appropriate, I think is appropriate. But that has to be in the context of, again, I'm going to mention our comprehensive planning process, because high-rise buildings, even along Commonwealth Avenue or Beacon Street or Route 9, still is going to put huge pressure on our infrastructure, whether that's drainage infrastructure, water and sewer infrastructure, as well as parks and other recreation facilities. In terms of increasing our forest canopy, I agree that the urban forest climate resiliency master plan should be followed a little more aggressively than we are, but also figure out ways to do more creative ways of increasing our tree canopy. For example, what I call pocket parks, or vegetation along street middle islands, and other places, ways in which we can do little things to increase vegetation where in a community like ours, where we don't really have the ability, because we're a built-out urban community, to increase the number of parks and the size of our parks. So there are a lot of the things that we can do along those lines, but I do not think that this is a that we need to put those two concepts of our community in conflict.
Thank you. Sana Hafiz, please.
Thank you. So I think the answer to a lot of these things is getting back to basics. It's no stranger. Nobody's unaware of the fact that Brookline's demographics are changing. And that's a reality that we're going to have to face no matter what. I think that it shouldn't be posed as an if this or that question. We have a flourishing urban environment as well as a suburban environment. And I see the benefits of both. I've grown up in both. I think that what we need to focus on is the intentional implementation of ways to foster green practices in both these environments. On the one hand, we've seen that almost $700,000 was allocated in ARPA, not only for this, but in part to create an electric boiler for extreme outside cold temperatures. However, as we've seen, it discussed the most climate-friendly solution is when the heat rises and goes up. However, if you look at High Street and some of these low-income communities, you can see that there's a lot of other problems that arise from thoughtless implementation. We see that folks don't have the ability to directly control those temperatures. We see increases in mold. We see unbearable conditions. It's,
1 minute, please.
Thank you. Well-intended programs that aren't really benefiting our community. It's harming our community. I support the climate resiliency master plan, the tree bylaw, a lot of these other efforts supported by so many great folks that are doing this work. But again, we need to be thoughtful about our implementation. We need to increase affordable housing along MBTA lines, supporting the MBTA Communities Act, and things like that will increase the ability for folks to live in town, not have to commute, reduce emissions. Increasing accessibility reduces emissions, point blank, period. Making this town more affordable and accessible for everyone will decrease the amount of effort, the amount of money, the amount of, to be honest, just straight products that will have to be consumed just to live. Making the town accessible makes it greener for everyone.
Thank you. Alec Leibowitz, please.
Thank you, John. I want to echo what we've heard from a number of my colleagues, which is I do think we don't necessarily face a binary choice here. And in fact, one of the really appealing things about Brookline is many of our neighborhoods today, I think, very effectively balance these two poles that have been posed in the question. John and I both live in Precinct 8, which is one of the densest neighborhoods in Brookline. We have a high percentage of multifamily housing compared to many of the other residential neighborhoods. We're also in the heart of the urban forest. And in fact, our precinct comprises a lot of the canopy cover that we have in North Brookline. Both of those factors have come about as a result of intentional policy decisions, as part of our long-term planning process, and as part of our tree protection efforts. So I don't think we necessarily have to make this binary choice, because in many cases, I think we've found that happy middle. So it's a question of staying on that path and being intelligent with how we think about accepting greater density in other neighborhoods. I do think there is some urgency to this question. I think many of us are aware that our housing market locally and regionally is in crisis. And part of the solution to that is going to have to be finding ways to allow more affordable and market rate units to be constructed in Brookline. We've taken a great first step with the work we did rezoning Harvard Street. And what was great about that process, two things in particular. One, it was very community driven. There were many, many instances for public feedback to be given. And in fact, the final proposal was crafted with the public as a working partner there. And secondly, it made intelligent and strategic use of the public transit resources that we had. So I think we can accept some greater density where possible. We can base that around public transit and bike and pedestrian infrastructure to allow for ease of travel, to take some of the potential strain off of our infrastructure. And at the same time, we should be more aggressive about enforcing our tree protection bylaw. And of course, I join my colleagues in supporting the master plan and its vigorous implementation as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Park, please.
Thank you, Sean. I agree with my colleagues about the master plan, the comprehensive planning. The planning is very important so we know where we can handle more buildings. We definitely want to be a community that has the housing that serves our community. You know, we want to make sure that everyone feels welcome, but we also want to be thoughtful about it. And that's where the comprehensive planning comes in. So I don't think it's either or. I think it's more of let's do the best that we can with what we have. And so many describe Brookline as leafy, and we actually have over 11,000 street trees on public land that are managed by the town. And I just want to do a quick shout out to Erin and her staff at DPW and the great work they do. But the vast majority of our trees are found on private property. So in South Brookline or in areas where there's more tree canopy, you know, that's wonderful that they have that. But Brookline's urban forest climate resiliency master plan sets the goals to increase the tree canopy in town. And they also identified North Brookline as a priority planning area. So there are many different ways. We just have to be creative. And some examples, you know, we have 8 schools, and a lot of those schools have gardens. Pierce School, the one that is going to be demolished, they have a garden. FRR has a wonderful big garden, and we really need to use the properties, the locations at school and do this. Excuse me. We also have a pollinator gardens. It's located at the library at the south end of the front loop on Washington Street. And did you know that at the Brookline Park on Brookline Ave, we have the Miyawaki Forest. Brookline's Mothers Out Front partnered with the town of Brookline, and they expanded the town's tree canopy and planted a mini forest. So there's many different ways that we can continue these projects.
Thank you. I think we're set. Yeah. Okay, next question. Voters care deeply about the future of ice skating at Lars Anderson Park. Where do you stand on the issue of reconstructing the current outdoor rink with new electricity-efficient technology, or constructing either a new enclosed covered rink or an open regulation-sized hockey rink on part land elsewhere at Lars Anderson Park? And we will begin with Bernard Green.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's climate because of the
I know.
electrical use. Yeah.
Very true.
Not being a skater because I don't have the coordination, but I have been out to Lars Anderson Park, and I understand why people have such love for that park or that skating rink as it's currently configured. Skating under the stars is quite romantic if that's what you're doing, and it's just fun. New electric skating rink. First of all, we have to be careful about Lars Anderson. It's an Article 97 parcel of land, and we can't just, and it's also subject to the will of the Anderson family, who require that certain things can't be built there. So I think that to the extent that we can find other land around town to build a big skating rink, that's one thing, but not at Lars Anderson. I would not be in favor of anything other than the current skating rink, maybe with a cover, but not an enclosed facility. The other thing, we should look at the state skating rink out at Cleveland Circle and see if we can develop some relationship with them to accommodate some of the needs for skating that we have here in Brookline. There are a lot of other creative ways that we can address the need for more skating facilities for those students who are playing on hockey teams, as well as just like to skate for recreation or enjoyment.
Thank you. So now you're next, but in advance, I want to apologize. I've been interrupting you periodically, and only you, but it's because everyone else here is in person and can see the little colored cards with the times on them. Okay. So we're only semi high tech here in terms of digital stuff. So I apologize that I have to interrupt you periodically with the timing. So Sana Hafiz, please.
No problem at all. I'm, believe it or not, I'm pretty used to it from being at select board pretty often. So no
Okay.
worries.
Okay.
In terms of, I think it's great that the community loves ice skating. I have been a lifelong athlete. I love being outdoors. Growing up in Florida, I've, grown up using outdoor spaces, green spaces. I can't testify enough to how much of an impact it had on me, my positive development, my appreciation for the earth, and just providing a safe place for youth to congregate and get into activities that are beneficial for their lifelong health. However, that being said, this isn't about my opinions, whether we should have this ice skating rink here, somewhere else. I'm just here to represent the will of the community. So I definitely would foster a more integrative, a more community-based process to see how residents feel about that, whether they would like that there or at a different location. I'm leaning towards the fact that another location may not be as viable, considering that we have a lot of other needs to balance, at the same time. I think that additionally, another part of that survey or poll, so to speak, would be, how can we make that more accessible should we create that? How can we ensure that folks across Brookline are able to reach this place, able to use it? Are we sure that they feel welcome? I mean, I
1
think
minute, please.
be a part of, thank you, be a part of every single lens and every single initiative that we take as a town. I mean, we can say that we've reached out to communities, but I have not experienced that living in Brookline myself. And I'm someone that's a little bit more involved. I mean, from going to these meetings, I have not been asked, I don't think a single time by anyone how I feel about it. I haven't been asked how my precinct feels about it. People that I grow up around, people that I live around haven't said, the same thing as well. So whatever infrastructure exists to get that community feedback, it needs to be improved. And that would be a priority.
30 seconds. Oh, okay. Thank you. Perfect. Excellent. Okay. Alec Leibowitz, please.
Thank you, John. There are two lenses that I approach this question with. One is the environmental lens. One is the lens of responsible fiscal management. From an environmental perspective, I do think it's worth exploring whether we can retrofit the existing rink to make it more energy efficient, and potentially, if we could, in a cost-effective manner, install a cover and get more usage out of it throughout the year. I think that would be a wonderful thing as well. Lars Anderson is also our most precious green space resource, so I would be very hesitant before making any land use decisions that would take more of that green space away from its current use. From the other perspective of fiscal management, I do have some concerns about the proposals I've seen to construct an entirely new indoor rink. Cost estimates that I've seen have been in excess of $50 million. We're talking about a quarter of a new school building to build one recreational facility that will, in all honesty, probably only serve a small segment of the population of residents. One of the commitments I know I've made to voters, and I think many of my colleagues as well, is that we will prioritize keeping this town as affordable as possible for residents for as long as we can. And the reality is that adding $50 million to our existing debt burden for a single recreational project does not, to me, at this moment, seem like wise fiscal stewardship. So I would want to look very, very carefully at the proposals we've seen. I'd want to see if there's any cost engineering that could be done or any savings that could be realized, certainly before we move forward with it. But from my perspective right now, I am not supportive of the construction of a new indoor rink.
Thank you. Susan Park, please.
Thank you, Sean. Yes, I think this is a very interesting question, but I can see why it's asked because there's a need here. And we, the BHS students, they have a ice hockey team, and we want to make sure that our constituents and our students, that their needs are met as well. So in this question, it makes me kind of think outside the box a little bit. It makes me think, well, one, we definitely do need to survey our community. We want to hear from the folks at the school. We want to hear from the students. But also, I'm thinking if we're going to put an ice rink, if that's a serious project that comes to the table, why not a sports center, a center that, excuse me, that it's an ice rink, but also with our climate change, with the carbon, the number one thing, according to Moms Out Front, or some of the moms in that organization, they're very concerned about our seniors. And as the temperature gets hotter and hotter, they're going to need a place to cool in the summer, because a lot of people don't have air conditioning in the summer. So I'm thinking more of a sports center, maybe an ice rink with a cover, but then also maybe a pool, and I know that there's, I'm introducing another thing, but if we live in the city and we don't have all this land, but if we're going to make one thing, I'm thinking we probably need to talk to some experts and think, how can we creatively solve these issues of, needing an ice rink? But also there's BU. BU has this amazing ice rink, and they do have free hours of operation. I'm wondering if we can partner with BU and, share that cost there as well. So there's a lot to explore. Thanks.
Thank you. David Perlman, please.
So I am vehemently opposed to building a ice rink at Lars Anderson. For one, there is the Article 97 consideration. It's legally not viable. Secondly, we have a finite amount of open space, and I really think we need to move away from this trend of thinking of all new potential construction as being only on open space. If we are to build something, it should be in an area that is accessible to the vast majority of our residents, that is close to a transit-rich area, and preferably on what's already blacktop, not on what is open space. I agree with Alec that now is really not the time to be taking on an expenditure that would be that enormous. Affordability is a major concern in this community. I would like to renegotiate our pilots so that we can gain access to the amenities that already exist within our borders or just beyond. We're being asked about a skating rink at Lars Anderson, and yet right across the street at Dexter, there's a state-of-the-art skating rink. I would talk to them about trying to make their rink available to Brookline residents. And more broadly speaking, I would like to talk to all of our nonprofits within Brookline about making their amenities available to Brookline residents. I also agree with Bernard's suggestion about looking at the skating rink in Cleveland Circle. That's just beyond the Brookline boundary, and it's on 3 mass transit lines, so very accessible for those who would want to utilize it. I think that's a more sensible approach. I would certainly like to refurbish the existing skating rink at Lars Anderson that's outdoors, so that we can continue to have what's really been a prized jewel of Lars Anderson for decades.
Thank you. This is going to be a combined question. It will be the last question, just in the interest of time, before closing statements. And it's, let's see how well you do. It's got an immediate aspect and then a very long-term aspect. Immediately, what are the 3 immediate steps a new sustainability director should take to move town departments and citizens to action while we face immediate and long-term climate threats? And then the second half, long-term. The town of Brookline has committed to 0 greenhouse gas emissions by 2040, a mere 16 years from now. How will we accomplish that goal? What are the primary obstacles to achieving it? How do you propose the select board and the rest of us in Brookline surmount those goals? And the first respondent, Sana Hafiz, please.
Thank you. So I think that in terms of the solutions and the things that we need to be mindful of, both in our short-term and long-term goals, are almost identical. I think that where we've fallen short as a town is that again, we have so many resources, we have so many experts, we have so many folks that are doing so much labor, but is it effective? Is it thoughtfully implemented? And are we really being effective and thoughtful in our outreach? You know, folks that have great ideas about wanting community feedback is a great thing. But if you don't know how to go about and get that feedback, not just once, you know, over the course of a lifetime, of course, generations, of course, across decades, then you're not going to have that there. You know, I think another major factor in the lack of equitable discourse is the fact that we, you know, often only talk to people that are voters. Meanwhile, not everybody that lives in Brookline is a registered voter. A lot of folks are residents. A lot of folks are immigrants. A lot of folks are non-English speaking. I mean, we are not meeting the benchmarks for a town that is lauded as so progressive in the media. I've seen so many efforts in this town, and I've seen so little.
1 minute, please.
The community, thank you. In the community that I live in, I think that a director would have to make sure that they have thoughtful outreach that stems from folks in the community with those lived experiences of being left out. I mean, that's part of why I'm running here today. Folks kept saying, why doesn't government listen to us? Why doesn't governance represent us? Why doesn't governance want our feedback except when it needs it for a diversity checkmark that they reached out to the community? Why? So here I am running. Instead, the new question became, will you run? Will you represent us? And here I am. I'm not the first one to have done that, and I won't be the last. But whatever comes next, whether it's me or somebody else, and you know, whatever department wants to do this, we need to have that thoughtful implementation, both in outreach, that sustained outreach. We need to have community, you know, stakeholders that are part of a panel. We need to have a report card that shows how effectively are we actually implementing the feedback that we get. You know, it's one thing just to collect feedback, it's another to implement it. We need a community grading scale that originates from those that are historically not represented, and that should include everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Alec Leibowitz, please.
Thank you, John. I think this is a really great question. In terms of the immediate steps for the new sustainability director, I group them into 3 categories. One would be focusing on a public communication strategy. 2 would be focusing on improving enforcement where possible. And 3 would be capturing resources that aren't currently available to us. To dig into that a little more, on the public communications perspective, as we mentioned before, the town of Brookline has done great work in aggregating resources for folks to facilitate the electrification process. Unfortunately, the biggest barrier to the adoption of those resources is just lack of awareness. The sustainability director should play a key role in devising a community engagement strategy to make sure those resources get into the hands of as many residents as possible. On the enforcement front, we already mentioned the tree protection bylaw. There have been documented implementation issues with that in the first year and a half of its being on the books. I think the sustainability director should work closely with Tom Brady and other key members of the municipal staff to really ensure that we're enforcing our tree protection bylaw as vigorously as we can, and also enforcing our new fossil fuel-free zoning code to ensure that all new construction does not contribute to new emissions. And in that third bucket, capturing resources, you know, we are very fund limited here in Brookline. The great news is that the state government and the federal government are making massive amounts of money available for just these purposes. So it'll be crucial to have a point person in the municipal structure who can go after and secure those resources for us. In terms of the longer term obstacles, we talked a little bit about the cost of electrification. That's certainly one. We've talked about the transit and infrastructure needs that we'll need to work on. That's certainly 2. And 3, I think, and tied into those 2, is the fact that in order to put the money and the funds into those first 2 categories that we need, we'll need the support of residents, and we will need to ask residents if they are willing to contribute more to those 2 needs. My commitment that I've made previously is if we consider putting new costs or fees on residents, I will put that to a direct vote to ensure that whatever plan is put forward is not onerously burdensome and does have the support of residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Park, please.
Thank you, Sean. So the 3 things that I would do if we had, excuse me, a sustainability director. 1, we need a dashboard. So on our website, we need to have a dashboard that keeps people accountable. You know, I think people do want to help the environment. They do want to help become carbon free, but they just really don't know how, or it might just be overwhelming. So we need a place on the town website, just like Wellesley. And And like I said before in one of my other answers, the Wellesley website, if you get a chance, just go on there because it's very intuitive, it's easy, and just clicking on a lot of these icons, it's very educational. So that would be the first thing, revamp the website and make it user-friendly. And just by, and then you can also see like how we're managing our sustainability goals. The other thing is reducing our barriers. We need to figure out, identify what the barriers are. And again, with this survey that we talked about in the last question, ask the people like, how can we help in helping your home become electrified? How can we come alongside you and help? So that's the other thing, reducing barriers. And then also we need to build infrastructure. We want to make sure that we have the infrastructure to help us meet these goals. And like I said earlier, I think the number was 50. We need 50 EV chargers. If people are going to, change to electric cars, they're going to need the infrastructure that's ready. So those were my three things. And of course, in all of that, it's all intertwined together in the infrastructure, the dashboard, the communication. It's communicating our community and making sure people know what to do. Thanks.
Thank you. David Perlman, please.
So I think first, with a sustainability director, we need to look at where precisely that position should rest, because I think it's critically important that a sustainability director interface with a variety of different departments so that it would be receiving input in real time from each of the different lenses by which we would look at issues related to sustainability. So for instance, there are legal issues, of course, and financial considerations, housing, commercial, preservation. So I would like to see the sustainability director work in all of those, interface with all of those different stakeholder groups. Outreach is certainly critical as well, as others have mentioned, as is communication, so people are aware of existing initiatives, proposed initiatives. In terms of the work that is already being done and or proposed, I think it's critical that we have measurable metrics by which to evaluate our level of success and with where we are at on a given initiative. So with something like EV chargers that was mentioned, we have a target number and we can see if we're approaching that number incrementally in the manner that we had projected. But some of our other goals are a little less tangible. And so to the extent that a sustainability director can develop some very clear metrics so we know if we are succeeding or not, or where we're falling short, what we need to accelerate on and emphasize, I think that will be critically important. In terms of enforcement of existing measures that are in place to ensure sustainability, I agree that's critically important. That's also potentially a small fee generator, and sometimes hitting bad actors in the wallet is the best way to ensure compliance. So I do think that we may need to look at that.
Thank you. Bernard Green, please.
Okay, once the sustainability director is on board, I think that we have to give that person a little bit of time to sort of get a feel for the town and identify issues that they think need to be addressed. But primarily, the sustainability director would work with ZIAB to identify opportunities as well as problems in terms of our climate action plan, and work with other departments to coordinate the work or the activities of various parts of the town to achieve our climate goals. Also, I think it's very important that we realize that the sustainability director is going to have a very important role to play in our comprehensive planning process to inform that process of the environmental issues that need to be that must be addressed as we go about planning our long-term needs. And finally, I think that it'd be very important for the sustainability director to have a role educating the community about general climate issues, but also the means by which they and individual families can address those issues, and the subsidies and maybe grants available, not so much from the town because we have limit restrictions on our ability to do some of these things, but from federal and state sources. And our sustainability director would be sort of quarterbacking, obtaining grants from those sources to provide assistance to residents to electrify and otherwise become more carbon free. So.
Thank you.
Mhm.
We are now moving to closing statements, just in the interest of time. Again, 2 minutes, and apologize so short. I'm going to give a couple of guidelines that come from questions, but you could use or not. Pretty general. How would you describe your environmental record or accomplishments to date? And what environmental goals do you have for the town for climate and environmental health? And again, 2 minutes each, and we'll begin closing statements with Alec Leibowitz, please.
Thank you, John. We've heard a lot of talk about, I think, feasible solutions tonight, but I think the reality is we will need someone leading at the executive level who's able to get these solutions across the finish line. As a member of the select board, I'll continue to do what I've done in town meeting, which is build coalitions across the political spectrum to advance the policies that we need. I've proven my approach in town meeting. In the past 2 years alone, I've led the passage of 8 warrant articles, including 5 new local bylaws. Along with my many co-sponsors and partners, I've reduced municipal operating costs, made our local government more transparent, promoted solutions to the housing crisis, strengthened Brookline's rodent control efforts, and put in place the strongest possible local protections for reproductive rights. I've tackled the tough issues in town meeting. I've built the support they need to pass, and I'd like to bring this approach to climate issues on the select board. One commitment I'd like to make: the select board has never had a representative or a liaison on the Zero Emissions Advisory Board. I would like to be the first such liaison. I think that will do or go a long way into bringing our climate leaders into the fold of executive decision-making and hopefully streamline the process of adopting workable solutions. My perspective on the board: I think our 2040 net zero emissions goal has to be the floor. We need to do better if we can, but that 2040 goal must remain non-negotiable. It's an important part of planning for our future and mitigating the potential worst impacts of the climate crisis on Brookline. And I think also important to remember here is that the cost of inaction in many cases will be higher than the cost of acting today. Ultimately, I think we all want to see a Brookline that's affordable and accessible to everyone, that offers opportunity to all, that celebrates our diversity, honors our values, and most importantly, and leads the way on climate and sustainability policy, not only in the Commonwealth, but across the country. With your help, we can make that vision a reality. I'm asking for your support and your vote on May 7th. Together, we can make real progress on climate issues over the next 3 years, and I hope you'll go to alecforbrookline.com to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Park.
Thank you, Sean. I want to first thank you, Sean, for moderating and for everyone who came out tonight and everyone who's watching. My website is susanforbrookline.com. It's really been a joy on this campaign trail because I think we all have learned so much. And Brookline becoming, carbon free by 2050 is a really important goal. For me, I have 3 daughters. One recently got engaged. I'm going to be a grandmother one day. So I really care that, Brookline is taken care of, that our infrastructure is in place, that we have the education, that, the people know how to electrify. And being an educator myself, having taught adults, college students, high schoolers, middle schoolers, the little guys, I really think that sets me apart because I am an educator. That's in my wheelhouse. I can motivate people. I think I've proven it by, yes on 3, passing in all 17 precincts, because I build consensus, because I teach, I educate. I think that, if I'm elected on the select board, I know that I can really help in this great endeavor. So I really hope that you will reach out. I'm open. I want to hear from you. I want to know what you think about sustainability. I want to know what's difficult about it. I want to know if you're thinking about it, because the more we hear from you, that's how we're going to be able to move the needle. And I've talked to folks on ZAB, and they were saying what they really need is someone to get the information out, because Brookline's great about doing their homework. We know what we need, but it's now educating the public. And I'm excited to help with a sustainability leader. I'm ready, and I'll be ready on day one. Thank you.
Thank you. David Perlman.
Experience matters. You asked about our record. So for the last 6 years on school committee, in various ways, I've already been.
If you move the microphone about 2 inches, yeah,
All right.
you won't distort. Yep.
Experience matters, and you also asked about our record. And for the last 6 years on school committee, I've served on the Select Board Climate Action Committee, the Net Zero Schools Subcommittee. I helped draft a sustainability policy for the schools. I helped expand our composting program at our various schools. We've been emphasizing the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. In some respects, our schools are already well on the path toward many of our climate change goals. Not all the way, of course, but you have to start somewhere. And there's been measurable progress on that front. So I believe that shifting over to the select board side, I would be able to seamlessly transition into continuing that work on behalf as a member of the select board. I am already familiar with high-level municipal governance by virtue of being chair of the school committee. I already have a relationship with the town administrator, with Bernard as chair of the select board. I have collaborated with some of you who are in this room on various climate change related committees, and that experience is critically important in terms of moving forward. Also on school committee, we've looked into electric buses. We've looked into electrifying our entire fleet of vehicles. And these are exciting endeavors that I would continue to pursue on the select board. I'm someone who is unifying. I don't like to argue with people. I might not agree with everyone, but I'm someone who's always respectful and solicits input. And I do think that's important too, to be someone who unifies and does not divide. And that very much describes me. I don't have any enemies that I know of, but even if I do, I would work with them too. Because if I get elected, I represent all of you, and I would take that very seriously.
Thank you. Bernard Green, please.
Yeah, I agree with David that I have a few enemies too, but I work with them. I work with anyone, even those I may disagree with, because our goal has to be what's good for the town. My thinking about the environment is that I want my children and grandchildren to be proud of what they can see that I have done, even though it's small, and even though it's with respect to a small piece of this large globe, they can see that I've done something that has an impact on our future with respect to the climate. Experience does matter. It matters because you need to know how our system works, how we can recover from losses. For example, the 2020 bylaw that the Attorney General twice rejected, but the select board knew how to figure out a way to go around that and work with the state to get us made a part of a pilot program with 10 other communities that enabled us to go forward with our prohibition on fossil fuel in new construction and major renovations. My environmental record, I think my environmental record has been very good. I don't always agree with the majority opinion on many issues. It's a matter of tone many times, and it's a matter of my concern that we not quote the scientists, but actually use the scientific method in terms of how we address environmental problems and figure out environmental solutions. My goals for the next few years is incorporating the sustainability director into the town's work with respect to climate change, and particularly incorporate a sustainability director into the work of ZAP.
Thank you. Sana Hafiz, please.
Thank you. I've been a community organizer for nearly a decade, but all that I've done is a testament to the communities I come from and live in. My experience is not only professional from working to make the aviation industry more sustainable, but also from the lived experiences of my community that deal with these issues every day. We can't continue to make the same mistakes. The first part of reducing waste is using less and using what we have more efficiently. I want to see a climate movement that is people-focused. Who are we protecting this planet for? Our success is only measured in how much we help all of our community have access to a greener life. So many focus on what they may lose when increasing equity and losing privilege, but not enough is focused on how much we will gain for centuries, God willing. We need to make information more accessible, including adaptive use programs and a lot that's on the website that confuses a lot of folks. We need to make sure that underrepresented folks are involved in supporting green programs, and we really need to reevaluate whether we're implementing that feedback. If we look at round 2 ARPA, there was a great program that was proposed that uses a lot of
1 minute.
Thank you. To support a green program. We had, historic numbers of folks coming out to support projects, but again, that beautiful process that brought out so many folks that were not heard from was extremely disappointing to the community. It was, in fact, so divisive. It was, in fact, so discouraging for folks to even come out again. Folks that have lived here for decades and have, lost hope in Brookline Select Board to represent them. So we are missing the mark there. We are missing the mark regardless of good intentions or anything like that. We need to change. We cannot make these same mistakes. Making Brookline more accessible in terms of affordable housing, affordable childcare, job opportunities in town. All of these things will make Brookline less polluting, more efficient. It will make it more accessible for everyone. The more, equitable we make Brookline, the less we'll have waste. I can't emphasize that enough. It's Zeav's job to push the limit, and it's my job to work with them, hopefully. And even, should we not get elected to the select board, I'll continue this work as a community organizer. At the end of the day, successful community solutions are the most effective, the most cost-effective, the most fiscally sound, the most environmentally friendly, and the one that will garner the most support from those with these concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I can tell you, candidates, I've been very impressed with all of your answers. Is there any way we can vote for all 5? Is that possible? So I also want to thank the many excellent questions that folks submitted. I apologize that we didn't have time for them all. And also special thanks to Town Hall staff for use of the Select Board room, to Heather, Stephen, and Wes at Brookline Interactive Group for all the digital and broadcasting help, to the candidates for your candid views and for your commitment to service and deciding to run, and to everyone in the audience, both today, remotely, and listening to the recording in the future. Early voting begins Saturday, April 27. Election day is Tuesday, May 7. And I hope this event has helped clarify your decision who to vote for. And good luck to the select board candidates. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Wow. Yeah, agreed.
It was a great discussion. I thought.
Yeah.
Really?
And really great timekeeping.
Exceptional,
Yeah.
exceptional. You've got a promising future career as assistant moderator, maybe.
Absolutely. It's harder than it looks. So don't like to insult anyone, but we had another forum where some people were getting 4 minutes, and some were getting 1.5, and it was all over the map.
Oh,
You stayed on top.
I think that's a testament to analog, right? The paper works.
How you doing? Yeah,
Oh,
thank
you're
you.
fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming out.
Your name is?